now that we've covered doing a hand-sculpted terrain, we're going to discuss some procedural functions. So I'm going to unhide a set of brushes I already have in the scene. And if I select this object and hit F4, you're going to see that I have an array of 64 brushes, and I'm going to just consider these a set of tiles of brushes that we're going to turn into displacements. So they already have the top selected. Let me bring back my displacement floater here. So since I already know that the tops are selected, I'm going to hit only selected quads. So it's going to make a displacement from all the tops. Now there's 64 displacements here. I'm going to now convert these all into a single sculpt mesh. Now I'm going to hit F4 to remove the edge faces on there. Now, whenever you create a sculpt mesh, it immediately, let's open this up, it actually immediately sets us to the push-pull tool automatically, assuming you're going to push and pull and paint on this. But that's not what we're going to do right now. We're going to use another function, and this shortcut I'm about to show you is actually available only in Wellworm Pro, so you have to own Wellworm Pro to do this, but you can also create what you're going to see here manually yourself. So I'm going to go to Level Design and click this button that says Add Landscape DCM. So when it does this, it's going to add a whole bunch of modifiers over here. And the modifiers that are listed over here are available for, some of them require Max 2015 plus and some require 2017 plus. So if you're using much older versions of Max, you may not be able to use this procedural workflow quite as seamlessly as I am here. But what I'm going to do is, you'll see that there's a displace modifier that's currently selected. And what that means is it's on this landscape and it's set up to use a height map or even procedural maps in order to displace this mesh. We also have a bunch of data channel modifiers that are set to drive the vertex blending based off of the topology of the terrain. So let's demonstrate this. So we're going to open up the material editor and we're going to procedurally create a height map. And I could load a height map that you downloaded or created elsewhere, but we're going to create one here inside of 3ds Max. So I'm going to start with a general and go to gradient ramp, and you can use pretty much most of the maps that are included with Max for this process. So we're going to use this gradient ramp to drive a terrain here. So I'm going to just drag this gradient ramp over to the map slot of my displace modifier, and I'm going to choose instance. Now if I drag the strength up, we're going to see that it kind of works, but there is an issue here. This displace modifier is using map channel 16, and that's why this is labeled 16. I'm going to have to actually change this to also use channel 16. Now we can do whatever we want to this texture, and it will drive this terrain, and notice it will also drive the blending here. And we'll start messing with this so you see what's happening here. So I'm going to change this outer one to white and this inner one to black. I'm going to go and add a little bit of noise into this. I want the valley here to be a little bit deeper. Drive this over here like this. And I want the size of this to be even bigger here. So now you can see that this texture is driving the displacement and it's driving the vertex alpha here. So if I go over here and change the strength of this, we're going to see that the landscape is not only changing, but it's also, the alpha blending is matching based off of the rules of this current setup. So you can do all kinds of crazy things. You can do whatever you want here to make this system work how you want. So for example, if I, instead of wanting this to be a valley, I could do something like, let's make this a pit here. You can do all kinds of things in here. So if I didn't want that circle in the middle, I can turn this to black, or we can raise this up or down right here. So this is a procedurally generated landscape with the alpha blending, and you can do pretty much anything you can think of. So modifying this map will change however this is going to look, and I'm just going to change this back to a linear, so it's back to a valley. Now we can use any kind of map really, so we can actually mix and match and add maps together. So in this case, let's add a composite map here. And I'm going to use this as part one of that. And I'm going to add another layer to this. Let's get a little creative here. Let's add a swirl map. Now, right now, this is choosing different colors here. Because it uses the brightness value, we're going to get rid of all the saturation so we can see it like this. And I want this dark one to actually be black. And we're going to put this into channel layer 2. And now, let's go ahead and add this composite map as the map to our displacement. And instead, now we see, because the composite is only showing layer 2, because we replaced it, you can see how the landscape is now driven entirely by that swirl. And if we go in here and update this swirl, for example, adding more twists, our landscape is going to update to be like that. But what we want to do here is actually mix these two. So we're going to go here into our composite map and say that this is going to, let's do multiply to begin with. Let's do addition. So now we see that we have this valley that also includes this swirl. I'm going to go in here into this and turn off tiling, and we're going to make this map smaller. And now you can see the swirl is just in the middle. Now in this case, the black out here is, we're not tiling it, so that's why it shows these straight walls going down. But it just shows you what you can do with all of these kinds of things. So in this case, if I wanted to make this more blended in, I could mix and match some more. So you would want to change the light here to maybe a little bit darker so it's further down. Or we could change, add a gradient ramp and blend it out and pipe that mixture back into here. But we're going to go back in here and go ahead and let this tile again at 1 to 1. Make it fill out here. So now we can see that we have a kind of a swirled shape mixed in with this other gradient. And you can do that with any of your grayscale maps. And we can bring in any map. So this is using World Vertex Transition. It's a two-way blend. And the way the blending happens is based off of this two data channels here, the vertex color by height. So if we go here, we can actually go and change some of these values in here if we really wanted to. And then we can also do this vertex color by curvature. And this is also affecting the blending here. So you can affect these two rules, and then this modifier is actually just moving the vertex color to the vertex alpha, because currently the data channel modifier cannot set vertex alpha. So again, this setup of modifiers is automated for you if you're using Wallworm Pro. And the reason it used this stack is because it detected that this is not using four-way blend. Now we're going to go discuss using four-way blends. So I'm going to unhide another object in my scene. And like the other one, this is a set of brushes, 64 of them. I'm going to select this. It's a ShelvX object. That's not going to be covered in this video. But anyway, the top polygons are already set to be the face selection. So just like before, I'm going to click, or I'm going to open up our displacement settings here and choose only selected quads. So it creates displacements just from the top ones. 64 are selected. I'm going to convert those into a sculpt mesh. And again, as noted previously, it defaults to setting us to the freeform push-pull. So I could start painting and pushing and pulling, but that's not what we're going to do. We're going to actually go ahead and do what we just did, and this time using four-way blends. So like before, I'm going to click Wallworm, Level Design, and Add Landscape DCM. The DCM stands for Data Channel Modifier. And this time you'll see even more modifiers than before. But again, we're also immediately selected on the Displace modifier. So I'm just going to use the same valley type gradient ramp as our map on this. Choose Instance on here. And now let's just start piping up the strength of this. You're going to see immediately the landscape is starting to blend. Now this material is from the Zen chapters of Black Mesa. And you may have seen previews of this already in some of our trailers and screenshots. So this is a four-way blend material, and you're going to see automatically now, let's hide this, we have multiple materials here. So as I crank this up, you're going to see the landscape start changing. And which material is appearing on any of these is based off of the blending rules of the shader as well as the topology here. So I have this going up very high. So up there it has that material and it blends down to these others. And then on these crevices and upward facing ones we have different textures. So if we want to modify this, let's bring this back down to 1500 here. So we can go in here and change the material again. So let's go in here and change some of these noise parameters on this. Let's change the size. You can even bring the amount down a little bit or up, whichever suits our needs. So again, you can see that the landscape is driven by the texture as well as the blending. So this makes more natural environments. So you'll have to take time to actually create your textures and tweak the data channel rules that are come here by default. They're just kind of like dummy default settings. So we can do all kinds of stuff here. We can say, okay, what if this wall on one side doesn't need to be as high as the other wall? It looks like I'm using this wall over here. So we can just darken this side over here. And if we don't want it to tile and blend from one side to the other, we turn off the tiling and we can bring this down more. So now we have one side that's a lot shorter than the other, and if that side is still too tall, we can bring it also down and say we need a little area right here that just happens to be a little taller, spiked up. You can double click it and choose a spike right here, or make it. Now these are very sharp, and because we're using seamless scale, those may not be what we want. So we may want to relax those. So above our displace modifier, we can actually just add a relax modifier. This is what we used earlier for what Hammer users are used to referring to as subdivide, but in Max you call it relax. So again, you can see that we have four-way blends that have four textures blending based off of rules, and it will blend based off of the topology of the land and using the rules that we currently have. And again, these are stuff that, again, these are just default values that you can go in here and change or add your own data channel modifier rules. If you don't have Wallworm Pro, you'll have to create these all from scratch. So now that we have this kind of procedural landscape, what if we need to customize it, right? What if we need to make sure there's a specific trench along here or specific sculpting? We can still keep it procedural. So here on top of this relax modifier, or below it, it doesn't matter. It just depends on where you want this. We're going to add an edit poly modifier. So by this being an edit poly, we have the displacements below it, but the data channels above that's going to change the blending. So here we can go and use the classic freeform tools. Let's go to the ribbon here, and we're going to do push-pull. So in this case, I'm going to push up some of these. Say we need a ridge here. And you can see that the materials are updating based off of this. Now we might be pushing into each other, so we might need to add some relax to this. If I need this path to be kind of flattened right here, we can flatten it out. If we need a path that goes along down here more specifically, we can do that. If we need steps, we can hit F4 here and do things like select a strip. Let me just hit Q here. This will be easiest to do it this way. And flatten these on the Z-axis. And we'll do the same thing here. So you can use all the tools. The only limitation is you have to make sure that you do not, under any circumstance, add or change. So now we have steps. Now these might be a little bit too drastic here. We might have to, if we want to see the blending of these, or the walkable state, we can turn on display walkable. And we can see you can actually walk up this. So this might actually take some tweaking. So we might have to take this and move it down a little bit. Yeah, like that. And you may have to tweak this. Oop. Hit Q so I select instead of move. Actually, let's turn on draw instead of, yeah. And move this down until you can walk up that section. Q again to select these directly, and W to move. Right. And we might want to just relax this a little bit, and it might make it easier to walk along here. All right, so now We have these more steps looking. You can, play with it however you want to make it more artistic. We want to make sure that there are no intersecting faces, self-intersecting faces of the displacements, because that is not what we want. I might gonna go in here and relax a little bit, a couple places. But anyway, you can go through here and tweak it. And these I don't want them to be able to walk up here, but we want these to go out here a little bit, add some character to it. Let's fix this area because we have a. Alright, I'm going to get rid of display walkable, hit F4 to go back. And now we have a landscape that started procedural, but then we started tweaking it to our specific needs. And by this being an edit poly modifier on top of these, I can actually right click it, rename it, and let's rename this. Rename this to Path Landscape. Path Test 1. We'll call it Path Test 1. And the reason we might do this is, what if we're not completely sure that this is the terrain we want? We might want to, this might be just a test. So by doing this, we can actually hide this and bring it back and forth. And if we don't want it for now, we can export it like this and then play around with it. But then if we want to try it again without losing the two options, we can unhide, or we can unhide this layer, this modifier, and see these changes. And this allows us to actually play with multiple different examples. So I could actually make another edit modifier instead. So let's do one. Let's add another edit modifier, or edit poly modifier on top of this, and rename this Test 2. And on this test, we may actually say, okay, we need a deeper trench down here. So I'm going to strengthen my brush here for push, pull, and hit Alt. And we may need this trench along here. And let me relax this a little bit. So there may be some water down there, or who knows what we have down there. But again, because this is like that, I can hide just that layer, or the layer above it, or below it, I mean, or hide both of them. So this allows you to play with it, and when I hit commit sculpt mesh at this level, so if I hit this button, it's going to be committed like this, and if I export this level into source, then we're going to see this terrain. If I want to see it the other way, all I need to do is go hide that modifier and recommit it and re-export it into the game.